Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining me this evening. I put it out, I think it was Friday, and I was asking about. By the way, if I look a little odd, I'm experimenting. I have a different camera this evening, and it's in a strange place. So, yeah, if I look directly at it, yeah, you can see me now. It looks like I'm talking to you. But as I say, I might look a little different because I am experimenting with a different camera. But as I was saying, I had put it out that any topics, questions you might like me to cover. And some of the things that came up, I was picking up a recurring theme through them. There were questions like, how do you stay on track? Things come up, slipping into old habits, things like that. Questions like, how do you manage without other kind of support, other people in your life, and so on. Doing a lot of research, but nothing really seems to be helping. So there were different things coming up, and I thought the recurring theme would be looking at, if you're on that path to recovery, how are you going to stay on it? The different things that can happen, the different little things that can sometimes hijack us, and so on. So I'm going to go through the questions. I'll answer them as best I can, but then I'm going to give you some questions to ask yourself, some problem solving questions to help motivate you, questions that you can ask yourself to help stay on track on your path to recovery. So first of all, as one of the questions came up, sometimes we are on a path to recovery. We're doing things in our own best interest. We're helping ourselves. But every now and again, we might slip back into old patterns, into old habits. This would be common, believe it or not. Thing about trying to break a habit has been maybe very deeply ingrained. We've been doing it a long time. Maybe we learned a different way of being, a different way of behaving. Sometimes we learn to bite our tongue, bite our lips, say nothing when maybe we should speak up. Other times we may be emotionally dysregulated. So anytime we feel challenged or threatened or someone makes an inappropriate joke, we find ourselves reacting the way we were back then. Sometimes this can be normal. It's something that really does require a lot of awareness. We need to look at our patterns, our triggers. This can be very useful in therapy, looking for the things that trigger us in different situations. One of the questions was, you're looking at our freeze response sometimes. Again, some of those responses can be triggered, reminding us of what it was like back in that situation. We find ourselves acting the way we did. So something like therapy can be useful for learning about our triggers. Once we understand them, it's not necessarily that our triggers go away, but what happens is they can inform us rather than make decisions for us. And what we do is we start to practice other little ways of managing. We might take little small steps in safe, comfortable environments where maybe we do speak up, for instance. When you find yourself going into a low mood, sometimes what we will do is maybe we are reflecting on the past, the things that we've been through, the things that were done, said, the things that happened to us. But sometimes it can be worth paying attention to what other things might be going on in your life. There could be a difficulty with another relationship, a friendship. You might have fallen out, argued or something. There could be stress at work. There can be other areas of our life which can trigger certain feelings, certain moods. Again, sometimes we might feel as if we're back in that environment, but not necessarily. So when I did a live stream, you'll have to hunt back through several live streams to find it. But I did a live stream about the different ways we can update our memory to recognize we're not in that situation anymore. So there might be something in that you would find helpful. Something else to consider as well is we can all have bad days from time to time. We're not always going to be, skipping and singing and jumping. We are going to go into a low mood sometimes, every bit as much as we might be excited. We might be overly joyful. So there are different things can be happening that can impact some of the ways we behave, some of the ways we react in situations. When we go into maybe those low moods, those low spaces, that's when we might find ourselves starting to ruminate again. We start replaying all those old interactions, those old conversations of back at that time. And we're trying to maybe think of a way of maybe rewriting it. What could I have done differently? What could I have changed if I was there now? What would I be saying? And a lot of the time, what we're doing is we're trying to find a way that maybe we could find just the right combination of words that would make them suddenly say, oh, yeah, that's it. Now I get it. That is one of the things that can keep us stuck. Now, this is the thing about rumination. We can't always switch it off, especially if it keeps coming up. It just pops into our head, put it that way. But what we can do, if you think of the things that have maybe got you to where you are now, you might have found ways to manage the rumination. Again, I talked about this previously on a live stream, where we just do little things to keep ourselves in the moment, reminding ourselves of what we're doing in the here and now. Again, right now, I'm having a cup of tea. Right now, I'm listening to this bloke from Northern Ireland waffle away on the internet. Right now, I'm brushing my teeth. Whatever it is, we remind ourselves of the little things we're doing in the here and now. We also recognize right now I have the thought. Right now I happen to be thinking. The key term each and every time is right now, because these moments pass, okay? We're not trying to push something out of our head. It tends to get worse when we do that. Nor are we following it through to some kind of conclusion, because the conclusion never really seems to come, which is why we keep ruminating. Instead, what we might say is, I will think about this later on. I will think about this at 5 p.m. I will think about this at tea time. I will think about this while I'm brushing my teeth before I get into bed tonight. You give yourself a time limit as well, maybe about 2 minutes. You're not going to think about it for any more than 2 minutes. It does take a bit of discipline, but what you might find is when you do start to think like that, you give yourself permission to think about it in a structured way. What you might find is you have control over it. Okay, it doesn't have control over you. You're not getting caught up going down endless rabbit holes and so on. You might even be asking different questions. You might be asking, instead of why did this happen and why did that happen and why did the other thing, you might be asking questions like, how did it happen? When did it happen? Where did it happen? What exactly was it happened? Again, you're giving yourself a sense of control. Okay. But do recognize that we are all going to have bad days from time to time, because not everything is going to go our way. So it's paying attention to the little things that helped you, maybe in those early stages, or that have helped you up until now. That might not work in every single situation, but that's when your creativity comes in, okay? You can start to think, what might be useful? What might be helpful? Not necessarily what's going to take this away, but what would be helpful right now, just in this moment, even for the next half an hour, the next 20 minutes, whatever it is. Just ask yourself little questions like that. Moving on, spending a lot of time researching stuff. You could be reading books, you could be reading articles, people's blogs, things like that. You could be watching YouTube videos. There isn't anything wrong with that. Sometimes it is good to educate ourselves. But the question I would ask is, what content are you consuming? Okay. Sometimes it is good to watch a video or read an article or something that does validate your experience. What sometimes happens is we start chasing more and more things that are going to validate our experience. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, but we are taking the focus off maybe what we need to be doing. So you can be looking at things that validate your experience, but if you're going to be looking at stuff about narcissism and things like that, it's worthwhile paying attention to the type of stuff that you're watching, because there's a lot of content out there that will tell you that narcissistic people are this, they're that, and the other. Watching content that might help you understand what goes on behind the behavior, what motivates them, what drives it, might be a little bit more useful. Um, Watching stuff that not just validates your experience, but gives you an insight into what's going on with them. Watching stuff that also might give you some ideas to help overcome it, get through it, put it into perspective. Not just stuff about narcissism, but even stuff about managing anxiety, watching stuff about looking at maybe your own attachment styles, how to manage this, what could help with that. Little things like that can be very useful. In fact, I would say they're probably more useful than continually watching stuff about narcissists having laser beam eyes and x-ray vision and stuff. So just be mindful of the content you're watching. Stuff to help you is really useful. It does also require you to maybe put into practice some of the things that content might be suggesting. It might work for you, it might not. Again, tap into your creativity. You find what works for you, you start ruling out what doesn't. You start to maybe adapt what does work for different situations. But what you're doing as well is you're keeping the focus on yourself and what is in your best interest, not all the intrigue and the drama that's going on with that other person. It's the stuff that you're going to find useful and helpful. Okay. Learning about your triggers, as I mentioned earlier as well. You can find, once you understand yourself a little bit better, it's easier to regulate what you're feeling when you understand what you're feeling. Sometimes we'll say we're angry. Sometimes we'll say we're anxious. Sometimes we'll say we're whatever. When we understand and we go that little bit further, that we're maybe feeling a lack of control, we're feeling that something is really unfair, we're feeling uncertain, we're feeling threatened, expectations haven't been met, we feel there's a sense of injustice, unfairness. When we get a sense of what's really going on, that is easier to regulate in the sense that it can inform us. It doesn't necessarily have to make the decision for us. Earlier on, I was saying things like, right now I'm doing whatever that, right now I happen to think. Also acknowledge, right now I happen to feel. Okay, because a lot of our feelings and our moods and things, they're of the moment, they're of the situation. Some are going to last a few moments, some are going to last a morning, some might last a day or two. But even then, what you might find is they're going to come in waves. So it's worth paying attention to those things. Pay attention to patterns as well, because when it comes to your triggers, there are different things can bring these up. I've got an itchy eye. Not a good thing to be doing when you're doing a live stream. Is that what you all look like? Wow. A lot of the time we're asking questions, what should I do? What should I do about this? And what should I do about that? There are different motivations for that question. It's not always necessarily a bad question. So I'll say that before I say this. But sometimes we need to be honest as to why we're asking that question, because sometimes what we really just want is some kind of reassurance. Am I doing the right thing? There was a question someone had asked about, they'd rang the police on someone and they wanted to know, did they do the right thing? I have no idea. I wasn't there. I don't know the person. I don't know the situation. So sometimes, pardon me, sometimes when we're asking, it's like we want some kind of reassurance, and that is human. Especially if you have been in a situation or an environment or a relationship where someone just systematically and repeatedly undermined your sense of reality, undermined your moral compass, undermined your sense of right and wrong. Sometimes we can struggle. We don't know if we're doing the right thing or not. And it is good to get the validation from other people. It's good to get an outside source. Sometimes we might ask, what should I do? Because it could be a situation that really does require maybe practical advice. It could be something like medical advice. It could be something like legal advice or something. It's Probably a good idea to ask in situations like that. But then there are other times as well, and I'm using my friend here. I'm not going to name him, but he's a friend of mine. Um, I often use him as an example because he did what we all do. Sometimes we ask, what should I do? Because what we want is an easy answer. We want something that maybe isn't going to have any consequences. We want something that will make maybe something bad stop suddenly. We want something that's maybe not so frightening. And the example I use is this friend of mine who he was in a workplace, and there was a guy in the office that just made his life a misery. He was passing on all his work to him, getting people to email him to do his job for him, pretty much. And every time he confronted him, every time he tried to challenge him, every time he said something to him, every time he tried to address it, the guy would either fly into a rage, or he would claim he was being bullied, he was being victimized, and he would threaten disciplinaries, grievances, things like that. And he asked me one day about what he should do about it, as if I would know, like. But I just asked him, what does everyone else do? And he says, well, he doesn't seem to bother with anyone else. Well, why does he not bother with everyone else? Because no one else takes him seriously. No one else listens to him. No one else buys into the nonsense. He just gets his own work to do. So he says, well, why don't you just do the same as they do? But then he was saying things like, yeah, but then he'll do this, and then he'll do that, and then he'll do the other thing, and then he will say, and eventually this went round in circles for about 5 minutes. And then I just said to him, so you either just want me to tell you what to do that makes it go away magically, or you want me to tell you what to do just so that you can keep doing what you're doing and just not feel bad about it. So which is it? And he had to think about that for a moment. Yeah, he's absolutely right. What we want is the easy answer sometimes when we're asking, what should I do? Sometimes it is reassurance, sometimes it is practical, real life guidance, if you will, for something specific. But other times it's because we want the easy route, and that's not always going to happen, unfortunately. Sometimes we do have to deal with someone. Sometimes we just have to be assertive. And something you might have found in your recovery has been maybe practicing little bits of assertiveness. You might notice that in some areas you might be assertive, like you might be like that in the workplace, you might be like that with certain friends. Being assertive doesn't mean aggressive, by the way. I need to clarify that. It just means you're being clear and concise and honest. Sometimes we want the way out of a situation, as I say, we want it to be painless. What we don't necessarily have to do, I'm going to say this the other way around. We can give an account of ourselves. We don't need to over explain ourselves. When we tell someone no, as it's often said, no is a complete sentence. We don't need to over explain ourselves. If someone is giving us a hard time and they're crossing our boundaries, we don't need to explain why our boundaries are important. They need to explain to us why they think our boundaries aren't important. Okay, so what we do is we give them their own work to do. They do the work, they do the explaining. To say sometimes our no can be a complete sentence. Sometimes what we might need, and I'm thinking of a work situation, we might need a bit of advice and guidance from either a manager, good old human resources, or somebody like that in order to deal with someone. But it's not always going to be painless. That's the thing. If you were to think about the pain, if we were honest with ourselves, sometimes the pain is just we don't want the conflict. We're expecting kickback, which we're probably going to get, by the way, if it's a narcissistic person. We don't want the hassle. We don't want the accusations. We don't want the reactive abuse. We don't want anything like that. We just want it to be easy. But this is the thing about being assertive. You imagine assertiveness, because I've been talking about defense mechanisms recently. Think of assertiveness as a defense mechanism, okay? But the difference between assertiveness being an adaptive defense mechanism and some of the other ones like avoidance and so on. When you're being assertive, you're not just getting out of a moment's discomfort. What you're doing is you're putting an end to it once and for all so that you don't feel longer term misery, okay? So, lost my train of thought. This always happens to me. I get prepared, I've got notes and everything, and then I wander off in tangents. Where did I get to? I'll go back through my notes. One last question I want to look at just before I go into the questions that you might find useful for yourself. Someone had asked about Carl Jung, and they're interested in my view on Carl Jung, his work and his theories. Carl Jung is someone I would have read many years ago, particularly when I was a student, a counseling student, a therapy student. These days, I'm still interested in his theory on dreams, dream interpretation, and the archetypes and things like that. I don't know if I agree with all of it, but that's only because I'm not sure if I understand all of it. But I am interested in his theory on dreams. But what I do like about Carl Jung is his concept of the shadow self, the part of us that has aspects, behaviors, things like that, that we find unacceptable and that we know other people find unacceptable as well. I'm interested in how he talks about being able to integrate. So we're not in denial, we integrate. We're aware of what we're capable of. We're aware of what maybe our dark id sometimes wants us to do. We're aware of those things, but because we're aware of them, we're able to rein them in. We're able to control them. What we're not going to do, if you think of the opposite, you think of a narcissistic person who believes they are flawless, they are perfect, never done anything wrong in their life. They are the most virtuous, self-righteous people you'll ever meet. They are wonderful. There isn't a bad bone in their body. No concept of their shadow self, okay? Our shadow self is full of those things, as I say, other people find unacceptable, but we find unacceptable as well. And whenever we're aware of that and we can integrate that into ourselves, we're able to rein it in. But what we also learn is there are things in our shadow self that maybe there's nothing wrong with them. We were just led to believe they were bad. There are people in our lives who would lead you to believe that it's wrong for you to stand up for yourself. It's wrong for you to have boundaries. It's wrong for you to have any kind of self-respect. Okay? When you're aware of these things in your shadow self, that's what I mean. You can integrate them. Okay? So that was about 20 minutes worth of waffle just to get down to what I wanted to talk to you about tonight. When it comes to your recovery, a lot of the work you've done, you might not have done it yourself, only in the sense that there was help and support. Going back to the question from earlier on, I'm just thinking because my brain did leap all over the place. I'm not saying it's impossible to recover on your own because everybody's different. What I would say is it's easier if you don't have to do it alone. That being said, you do not have to tell everyone your story. No one need know. That's entirely up to you. But a good therapist could help you. You could share it with them. Other than that, as I often say, the antidote to toxic people are healthy people. You don't need to tell everyone your story. You don't need to make them aware if you don't feel comfortable with it. But what you do is you start to form healthy, supportive relationships with other people. So there was me meandering again, getting back to the point. When it comes to your recovery, you've probably done a lot of the work already. You probably have come quite a bit from where you were. That doesn't mean that things don't come up from time to time. It doesn't mean you don't get triggered from time to time. It doesn't mean you don't get upset from time to time. And it doesn't mean you don't have memories that come up as well. But sometimes we might struggle with things like our self-discipline. We might struggle with things like our motivation. And this can be for a variety of reasons. Sometimes, as I say, we just might be having a bad day. We could be going through a bad patch. There could be another area of our life where we're struggling. But the questions to ask yourself, if you find yourself getting into a rut and you're slipping back into old behaviors, as you might have done when you were in that toxic environment, again, before you ask someone, what should I do? I'm not saying you shouldn't ask that, but before you do, you ask yourself questions like the first one is, what isn't working here? What's not working right? What isn't helping me? What is it needs to be different? What needs to change? Okay. You start to think about where you are at the minute. Where has your motivation went? It could be maybe you're not moving as fast along as you would like to. Okay. You think you should be further along. I can't say whether you should or whether you shouldn't because everyone's journey is different. But you might be feeling a bit frustrated with yourself because things keep coming up. So you maybe ask yourself, what isn't working here? What needs to be different? What needs to change? If it is something specific, then again, rather than what should I do, you might ask yourself, what do I need to do? Again, going back to the change. What needs to be different? What needs to change in order for that to happen? What is it I need to do? That might not give you a solid answer, but it might give you an idea, okay, of what needs to be different, what you need to do. And again, that could be being a bit more assertive, that could be finding some kind of motivation, in which case, then you can ask, well, what should I do about that? And that could be asking anybody, it could be asking a friend who's, well, I go to the gym, why don't you come with me? Or, why don't you get your CV out and update it and send it to a few people? But you're asking yourself, what is it I need to do? Another question you could ask is, what can I do? Okay, because some things are not necessarily within our power or within our remit. We might not have the skill, the experience, the resources. It could be a number of things. So you ask yourself, what can I do? So whatever it is you need to do, can you do it? Can you do it alone? Do you need a bit of support? Do you need a bit of encouragement? Is it something you might need specific advice for? Or is it something you might have to learn? It could be, again, could be going to therapy. It could be going to life coaching, learning assertiveness, different things like that. It could be a skill, because it could be maybe you need a new job, you need a better job, you want the job you like, but you need to either learn a new skill or update the skills you have. So how do you go about doing that? So what can I do? So you might need help, you might need guidance, you might need some kind of support, and you might need practical help and support as well. Which case you might ask yourself, where do I get that? Who would be the best person to ask? When you're asking what can I do as well, what you might be asking yourself are, what are my options? What are my choices? What are my resources? What could I do? What could I do that might not get me what I want, but what could get me just that little bit closer? What could be maybe a stepping stone in order to get to where I want? Again, could be learning a new skill or something, could be updating your CV, could be joining some kind of group or something, a book club or whatever. A book club, God, you can tell I'm a child of the 80s. They still have book clubs. I don't know. Um, yeah, it could be what gets me that one step further or that one step closer. Sometimes, especially if we're stuck, we will look at things such as steps, but we might actually look at them as if they're obstacles when really they're things we need to do first in order to get where we want to. I think a useful question when it comes to doing steps, little small steps at a time, is to ask yourself, what, even just a small thing, what small thing could I do today, first thing in the morning, first chance I get? What could I do that I might thank myself for later on? I'll thank myself for it a week from today, or a month from today, or a year from today. Whatever it is, what would I thank myself for doing today in this moment? Something else to help you with your motivation is to maybe put yourself on a scale. There's something you need to do, something you'd like to do, something you want to do, but there's a lot of blocks for various reasons. Again, there could be obstacles. They could be things you have to navigate around or through, or they could be steps you have to take. So what you do is you get yourself a scale from 0 to 10. Tier 0 being you just cannot be bothered. You can't be asked. 10 being you're going to go at it at warp speed. Okay? So you put yourself on that scale and put yourself there honestly. Even if you're a 2, even if you're an 8, doesn't matter where you are. When you put yourself on that scale, how prepared are you to do whatever it is you need to do in order to help yourself? Wherever you are on that scale, look at the scale and then ask yourself, what would I do if it was just 1 point higher? Just 1 point. So even if it is low, even if it's a 2, what would you do if it was a 3? What would be different? What you're doing is you're encouraging, you're motivating yourself. You're also tapping into your problem-solving skills. Fellow YouTuber, friend of mine, Dr. Ruth Ann Harper, said one time we were live streaming together. Sometimes we have to remember that the motivation comes afterwards, okay? We do whatever it is we need to do. It's afterwards we get the motivation, and it might not be immediate, okay? We might not get it immediately. But when we start to think of the long term, we start to see the benefit of it, and we start to see how closer we are to whatever it is we're looking at. That's when the motivation and the energy kicks in, whenever we start to get the benefit. So, who would be interested in doing a little exercise? This is going to be a real life experiment. I've never done this on a live stream before. And I've no idea how this is going to go, because normally I would be talking to someone, they'd be in the room with me. This is about trying to motivate ourselves, okay? This is about trying to stay on track. So, what we do sometimes is we think of what we would like, where we would like to be, what we would like to be doing, what we would like to have. So, if you will, these are aspirations. And that's not a bad thing, by the way, because it's good to aspire. It's good to have ambition, things like that. But sometimes, even though we can have aspirations, again, we can talk ourselves out of it because loss of energy, loss of motivation, things like that. So, strange little exercise, but I'm going to show you how this works. First of all, if you were in a relationship with a narcissistic person, when you first met them, when you were falling for each other, you think of the amazing future that you were promised. It's going to be wonderful. What do you see? Hold on to your hat. It doesn't get any better than this. We're sold a fantasy, and it feels good because we can imagine it. Okay, it's almost like we can feel it. We feel very enthusiastic, and because of that, usually we're letting a lot of things slide because we're hoping for this future. Now, over time, what you might find is that future becomes more and more distant. It gets further and further away, but you are being blamed for the future not being there. It's all about you. You didn't say the right thing. You weren't thinking the right thought. You wore the wrong colored shoes or something. One way or another, it's getting further and further away, and yet a lot of the time it's still dangled in front of you as if it's a possibility. And the part of us that's hooked in that fantasy keeps chasing it. We think if we comply one more time and so on. So it's a similar thing, only this time you're not being lied to, and you're not lying to yourself. This time, you imagine, whether it's a year from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now, whatever it is you would like to do, That's our aspiration. That's what we're aspiring for. It could be a better job. It could be a relationship with someone really nice. It could be living somewhere else. It could be having a good circle of friends. It could be having reconnected with people that you lost contact with, building either new relationships or rebuilding the old ones. One way or another, you imagine what your life, this is the life you would like to have. So I'd like you to just take a moment, and I'd like you to imagine that maybe it is 1 year in the future. Okay. So you've just tuned into me. Okay. 1 year from today, you're listening to me. Who knows? Maybe I've got different glasses, got a different haircut or something. No, I'm not going to have a different haircut. I've had pretty much the same haircut since I was about 18. So, anyway, but one way or another, it's a year from now and things are a bit different. You imagine talking about life 1 year from today. You might be talking out loud as if you're having a conversation with someone and they're asking you things like, I could be asking you questions like, well, how are things been? I haven't seen you in a year. So it's like a catch up. We're talking about life since then. And you might tell me about what it's like to have gotten back in contact with some really good friends that you had. You might be telling me that you did update your CV. You sent it out to a few places, and who knows, you may have had a few offers, but you've got a new job, and it's a job you really like. It's better money, there's more responsibility, you feel respected, things like that. You're having a good life. You might be in a relationship with someone who is interested in you. They like to hear you laugh. They like to hear your stories. They ask you how your day was, and they listen because they really are interested. They encourage you. They also call you out for doing stupid things, but not in a bad way, in a helpful, supportive way. But they're very encouraging. It's someone you feel comfortable with, someone you feel safe with. There's no pressure on anyone. You might not be living together, you might have your own places. As I say, there's no pressure on either of you. You're fine as things are. You might have a new network of friends. Maybe you did join that book club. Maybe you're coming towards the end of whatever course it is that you'd applied to do. And you're feeling pretty confident when it comes to the exam. You've grasped it. So simple. It comes to you naturally. When you start to talk, even if you're talking to yourself, by the way, because it might sound a bit odd, when you start to talk about something that you would like, something you would prefer, something that you would want, but you talk about it as if it's in the here and now. Okay? It's like you're in the future, but you're talking about it as if it's here and now. Okay, it's a little bit of a role play. But if you pay attention without forcing anything, just start to notice anything different that you might be beginning to feel. When you start to talk about your preferred future, your preferred outcome, your preferred life. Would be interested, by the way, in the comments if anyone writes down anything that they're noticing. But when you notice whatever it is different, whatever it is you're feeling that's different, it could be anything. It could be even something physical. Knots in your stomach are starting to loosen or whatever. But when you get a sense of that, right, okay, let's jump in our TARDIS and come back to the present. Whatever it is that's given you, that could be, again, feeling like a weight off your shoulders. It could be a loosening of the tension that you're feeling. It could be an energy that you're feeling. Maybe you're feeling a bit more enthusiastic. When you get a sense of what it is, that could well be the energy you need to go and start doing whatever it is you need to do. If it's about the gym, you imagine yourself a year from now, okay, you're now fit and healthy or whatever, you've got a ton of muscle or whatever. I don't know, whatever people do in the gym. You might have the figure, the body, the shape, the muscle, whatever it is that you had set out. You might be fit and healthy. You might be prepared to run that marathon that you had wanted to enter. You could be fit and healthy because you've been practicing all year. Whatever it is, when you get a sense of what that's like, as I say, that could well be the energy you need to do whatever it is you need to do. And that could just begin by, I don't know, it could be sending someone a text. It could be looking at local gyms, the nearest one to you, whatever. It could be looking at social groups around you that maybe meet up, go for walks, hikes. Could be a history group, whatever it is you're interested in. And as I say, you're asking yourself, what am I going to do that I'm going to thank myself for 1 year from today? Or even 6 months or 5 years, whatever it is. You pick your own time limit. But what is it I could even make a small start at? If you find your motivation starting to wane, pay attention to what's going on with you. It could be any number of things. Could be stress, could be, again, memories coming up. But then maybe just try that exercise again. And it even could, as I said earlier, it's not even necessarily a year from today. You could even just be asking what would be useful, even if it's just for the next half an hour, even just for the next 20 minutes, even just for whatever it is. Okay. So I hope you found that to be helpful to, as the title was, about taking charge of your own recovery. Ways to encourage, motivate yourself, questions to ask yourself, what is it needs to be different? What is it isn't working? Start to rule out what isn't working. Another thing that just popped into my head is sometimes I often say, look at things the opposite way around. Sometimes they can help. If there is something you need to do, now again, you might be struggling with how to go about it. But if there is something you need to do, something you need to change, maybe ask yourself, be honest with yourself, what would happen if I didn't? What happens if I don't do what's in my best interest? Because sometimes we have to pay attention to the consequences of not doing something every bit as much as the consequences of doing something. There could be consequences on either side. They don't always have to be negative, who knows? And they could be painful in the short term, but they might be useful in the long term. That, again, could be something you thank yourself for. But when you get a sense of the consequences of doing something as well as not doing them, the power you have is to choose your consequences. Maybe then that's when you start to look for what would make it easier. Who could help me through this? What advice do I need? Okay. So, like I say, hope you find that helpful. I am now going to questions. If anyone has a question, as always, if you would be so kind as to put a question mark to it, it would be so much easier for me to find. So, where did we get to? Let's get back to the beginning. Hello, Carol. Hello, MT. Hello, Psychic Consultant. Hello, On My Way. Angel Life. Okay, right. So, let me go. Where are we? Hello, Yvette and Jorgen. It's the thing when you go back to the beginning. I'm reading the conversations from the start. Where did we get to? Paralegal teacher says, I found learning about narcissism very helpful to me. It's good to learn, but led to some feelings of hopelessness and grief. Nonetheless, I turned to radical acceptance and began to heal. Radical acceptance, yeah, that's something I didn't mention earlier. Acceptance, I often say, I probably say this every live stream, but yeah, when we accept something, we have to remember it doesn't mean we're okay with it, doesn't mean we're fine with it, doesn't mean we approve of it. We're acknowledging it is what it is. And when it comes to other people, their personality types, their constructs, their repeated patterns of behavior, we're not okay with it just because we accept them as they are. What we're doing is we're acknowledging maybe it's not within my power to change, and they probably don't want to be changed, probably think they're fine as they are. That's when we can start to focus on ourselves. The said about learning about the narcissism, it is a good thing. And it's the majority of the questions I get on my channel are all about narcissism. What I try to do is to talk about the motivations behind it and not just talk about what they do. Talk about the reasons why they do it as well. I don't know, maybe it's just me. I think that that's useful for people. But in things like this, the live streams, that's when I like to talk about what to do about it, how to help yourself, and so on. So it is about trying to find that balance. So, hello, Ellie. What's pots and pans? So, let me see. Looking for hello, Sixth Sense Amelia. A lot of names in here I recognize. It's really nice that people tune in to me every week. I get to know their names. Don't know the people, but I know their names, and it's nice to know that they're watching. So let me see. Maud Larkin Marionette says, my assertiveness was quickly interpreted as aggression, so I didn't advocate for the narcissist when he asked any longer. Your assertiveness probably will be interpreted as aggressive in the same way as you not handing over the last of your money is going to be selfish, or the only piece of food you have as being selfish. From the narcissistic person's perspective, you are always going to be the bad guy if you're not complying with them. I think we just learn to be okay with being the bad guy. What we don't do is we don't become the bad guy that they claim we are. But yeah, your assertiveness probably would be interpreted as aggression. Even your tone of voice, you're going to sound just like I'm talking right now, and they'll probably claim that you're shouting at them or something. So, where'd we get to? Waffling on made me laugh because it's common lingo here also. Sixth Sense Amelia. Yeah, waffle is a good old Belfast word. It also helps to ask yourself, if you do this, whatever the scale, how can this nurture me? Nurturing is what is necessary to healing. It starts with self-compassion. Paralegal teacher, that's a very good way of putting it. It's something I did not say about the self-compassion. Yeah, we are going to have bad days. We're going to feel low. We're going to feel pain. We're going to remember things. We're going to be triggered in different ways. A little bit of self-soothing. That's where maybe what would be useful for the next 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. What would be useful this morning? What would be useful this evening? Not what takes it away, just what makes it a little bit easier. And that could be something as simple as a cup of tea, walk, hot bath, The Empire Strikes Back, favorite movie, whatever it is, just something, anything, not to take it away, just to make it easier to get through that next little period. Recognizing it is perfectly okay as well to feel pain. It's not nice, but it's normal. It's human, just like it is to feel joy or excitement or boredom even. They're normal human reactions to different situations and stimuli. So, where do we get to? I walk the wild beach. I used to love walking the beach. I haven't been to. I don't live near any beaches at the moment, but I used to like walking along the beach. Where did I get to? Looking for. Again, this is so much easier if I say a question mark. So, but I am also. Oh, Elliot says, I'm feeling resistance in myself to hope again, dream again. I'm wondering, is that part of the exercise I did earlier? And there could be something there. You're feeling resistance in yourself to feel hope. Again, in therapy, that's something you might look at. Where is that resistance coming from? Sometimes we can be led to believe, again, if I mentioned earlier, the shadow self, the parts of it is parts of us that we've been led to believe are unacceptable. We might have been led to believe it is unacceptable for us to feel good. There's something wrong with us. We're being selfish. We're being horrid. If we're feeling good about something, we must be taking something away from someone else. Again, that's very narcissistic, all or nothing kind of thinking. And it's the sort of thing that you might be conditioned, brainwashed, lied to, led to believe about yourself. So it's worth looking at what that resistance is. Could be this fear, I don't deserve it. Well, I would disagree. I think a lot of people would disagree. And I think maybe at your very core, you might disagree as well, because maybe you do deserve happiness. Maybe you do deserve a good life. Okay, where do we get to? Very happy Mondays. Wow, you know that feeling when your shoulders relax and you didn't know they were by your ears? I know that feeling. Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you're getting at. For the future exercise, hadn't thought about this. You need to know where you want to go to get there. Yeah. Again, aspirations are good, ambitions are good, things like that. But the question is sometimes, how do we get there from here? Sometimes we will see obstacles, we will see barriers, and they might well be. But other times they could just be steps we have to take to get that step closer, to get that little bit closer. That exercise, when you imagine what it's like to have what it is you're hoping for, and you get a sense of what's going on with you. And as I say, sometimes you might feel an excitement, you might feel relaxed, you might feel whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. But sometimes, again, coming back into the present, that could be the energy you need to do just that first thing, just that one small first thing. And if you have to keep repeating that in order to keep making the other steps, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's still getting you there. Okay. Actually, he says, someone is asking how my day was. They listen, they care. Slow down. I understand the individual words, but not when they're put together like that. Give yourself permission to talk to someone who does care then. Okay, where did we get to? Oh, I've just jumped. Rita asks, do you think there's a difference between a relationship with a narc or being a relative? I say as a relative, you forgive more and being stuck in a stim. I'm not sure if I pronounced it right. Never give up fixing them. There are a lot of difference in a lot of different kinds of relationships. When it's a relative, when it's a relation, when it's family, it can be different. It could be someone you've known your whole life, for instance. There is also something about family. Was it blood's thicker than water and stuff like that? And if you're being hurt by a relative, someone that's related to you, maybe it was a parent, maybe it was a sibling, but it's someone that you'd like to think would be on your side. The difference is with a partner. It can be difficult to leave a partner, but we can, and we can go and find a new partner. I don't know. Some people might argue you can't necessarily go and find a new family. What you might do is you might go and have your own family. What you do is you might go and you might build links and bonds with other people. But there is, I think, there is something different when it is a relationship with a family member. As I say, it could be someone you've known your whole life. If it was a parent, that parent nurtured you as well as maybe punished you, criticized you. Again, if it's a sibling, you probably played together, as kids do. So, and even just like in a relationship with a narcissistic person, if they were mean and horrible all day and every day, it would be so much easier to leave. It's the times whenever they're nice and they're good, or they're showing some kind of compassion or generosity, or they're laughing at your jokes, or they buy you something nice or whatever. That can be very confusing. Again, just like with a sibling or a parent, doesn't matter how mean your narcissistic parent was, they might still have been the parent that got you that bike you wanted for your birthday. It's very hard to separate that, recognizing, because we often think good people do good things, bad people do bad things, and it's very hard when that's not true. Whenever we see differences, whenever we see discrepancies, I suppose is what I'm saying. There can be something different. Sometimes maybe with a relative, there is more of an expectation of loyalty. Maybe, is that the right word? I'm not sure. So there can be that as well. That being said, you managing your expectations, your boundaries, I would say, depending on how the level of the narcissism, and the nature of the relationship, how you manage yourself would be pretty much the same. Okay, it is about you looking after you. It is about you being assertive. It is about you having boundaries. We don't always need to cut someone off. We don't always need to go no contact. What we can have is managed contact. The contact can be conditional on their behavior, things like that. But again, without knowing your situation, I can't really say too much. Okay, so where do we get to? Oh, I've just jumped again. Try how you want to have experience adjusting advice regarding enforcing boundaries or experiencing forgiveness for oneself when dealing with people raised in faiths that encourage or program extreme tolerance. What does extreme tolerance mean? I know what you're getting at, but this is what I would be wondering if they're trying to teach you what extreme tolerance is. Because sometimes you might be told, but you have to be tolerant of everything and everyone, which on paper doesn't sound like a bad idea. And yet, the people that are telling you that aren't very tolerant of you. You have questions. There are things you disagree with, things you don't get, things that you get wrong. They don't always have tolerance for your mistakes and things like that. So again, it's looking at those discrepancies, isn't it? It's looking at sometimes those double standards. Again, this is the thing about your boundaries. The question that often comes up is, how do you get people to respect your boundaries? You can't. It's up to you to enforce them. We don't have to be mean. We don't have to be rude. We don't have to be horrible. And we don't always have to go to the nuclear option of just cutting somebody off. But what we do is we make it clear there are consequences if they continue doing what they're doing. Tomorrow, I'm doing the last part, and it was a video I did about 2 weeks ago. I was talking about reactive abuse, what it is and why they go about doing what they do. It's when there's provocation, or even if you just react to something you're not comfortable with. Doesn't always have to be provocation. It's just them doing whatever the hell they want. But they focus on your reaction as if you are the bad person. You know, there's something wrong with you for not being okay with being treated like crap, or being lied to, or being domineered, being controlled, okay? Sometimes there is deliberate provocation, and sometimes we explode. We go into a temper. We might scream and shout and all the rest of it. They will always focus on the reaction as if we're doing a bad thing. The video I'm putting out tomorrow, I'm talking about how you handle that, okay? You handle that the same way as you handle any boundary. Remember, it's not that we get them to respect it. We make them respect it, but we show them there are consequences if they don't. One of the ways we do that is we ask them to explain. As I said earlier on, we don't have to explain why we thought that we think it's not okay, or we don't like our boundaries being crossed. It's not okay to be treated like this. What we do is we explain to them why they think it is okay. All right. Why is it okay for me to be held to account for what you're doing? You know, we don't need to ask it in questions like that, but really that's what I'm getting at. Why would you think anybody would be okay with being screamed at? Why would you think anybody would be okay with being lied to? There are better ways of asking these questions. I will be talking about that in tomorrow's video, but it's about how you manage your boundaries with them, okay? When you don't over-explain, you don't hope they're going to get it, and you don't take ownership of their reactions, okay? Because they might get angry, they might guilt trip you, they might shame you, They might tell you that, this big, bad, terrible demon's going to come down and get you because you won't let them treat you badly. Whatever it is, okay? You don't explain yourself, you get them to do it. So tomorrow night when that video comes out, I hope you find something useful in that about how to manage that. If I can sum up your question, it's like, how do you manage those double standards? Would that be a fair way to put it? Sometimes, depending on the situation, and I always say it's about being careful. Sometimes you're just dealing with someone with a degree in muppetry. Sometimes you might be dealing with someone who's very, very malignant. So it's always about keeping yourself safe. But sometimes it is just about calling it out, calling it what it is. It's unfair, it's double standards, it's whatever it is. You're trying to provoke a reaction. It sounds like you're trying to do this. It's how we do that and how we do that safely. So I'll be talking about that tomorrow. So where do we get to? It's jumped again. Where do we get to? Reb says, I took a Richard Grannon course about imagining a future about 1.5 years ago. 3.5 have happened for me. Working on the other 2 definitely works. Rebs, I'm glad to hear that. Richard Grannon does have quite a few courses. He gave me access to look at the one he did with Mark Vicente about recognizing the cult-like nature of narcissistic relationships, how they brainwash you, how they hook you in. But there's a lot of really good stuff there about how to free yourself from that, how to untangle, unmesh, get yourself unmeshed from that deluded fantasy that they sold you. There's a lot of really good stuff there. And I've met Richard a couple of times. He's a really nice guy. He's very genuine. So, yeah, I'm glad that you found that helpful. Anyone else listening? I'll say Richard does have some good stuff on his website if you want to have a look there. So, let me see again, looking for a question. Oh, here we go. Do you find folks raised to turn the other cheek struggle with identifying and enforcing boundaries, for example? Advice makes you just... Well, you see, that's the thing about turning the other cheek. If you're talking about religious stuff, I think people, and I'm not quite sure what that even means when you say turn the other cheek, but I know it's in the Bible somewhere, but people confuse meek with weak. They think they're the same thing. They're not. They are completely different. You think of some of the stories in the Old Testament, these men that were very meek, and yet they went out and defeated armies. They are 2 completely different things. And this is the thing about forgiveness as well. I talked about this on another live stream. It's something people struggle with, this concept of forgiveness. Some people think that forgiving someone means you welcome them back with open arms. Well, not necessarily. It doesn't have to be, because why would you welcome someone back who is completely unrepentant and prepared to do the same thing to you again? I mean, how often do you keep giving them another chance? It doesn't always mean welcoming someone back with open arms. All it means is sometimes I'm not wasting any more time on this. Not wasting any more time with that person. I'm not going to hold a grudge against them. I'm not going to hold anything against them. They're just go off. You go and you do you. Just do it somewhere else. Don't be doing it anywhere near me. Another term I like to use instead of forgiveness is letting go. We learn to let go of them. We are no longer prepared to try to help someone who doesn't want to be helped. We are no longer prepared to keep giving chances to someone who just, they'll go through about 10 chances a day if they could. So it's looking at even what that term turn the other cheek means. Does it really mean just present yourself in order to be abused yet again? I don't think it does. Think about what I was saying about that difference between meek and weak. They are 2 very different things. They rhyme. That's about it. Other than that, they are 2 completely different words. Okay, let me get to... Every time I go to read something, it jumps. So I have to scroll back. Boundaries just become a red flag to a bull when it's a narcissist. Don't expect anything but trouble if you say no. Yep, absolutely right. But you have to, as I said earlier, you have to show there are consequences of them not respecting your no. This is the thing, if you lay down a consequence, this is why I say you don't always go for the nuclear option, but you do show there are some consequences. If you don't follow through with those consequences, even if you do something else instead, they've just learned you're not serious. They've learned they've got away with it. So when there are consequences, this is the thing, we expect someone to sit there and say, oh, you got me, fair enough. Oh, I won't be doing that again. I've learned my lesson. No, they will kick up a racket. They will accuse you of being the most horrible person in the world. They will tell you that you don't care about them because of all these terrible things that have happened to them. They will threaten to tell other people how mean and horrible you are. They might even roll about the floor in front of you, kicking their legs in the air and squealing. What we learn with our boundaries is the difference between what's mine and what's yours. That's their behavior, that's their reaction, that's their feelings. They're really just reacting. Really, I think a lot of the time when a narcissistic person kicks off about your no, I think really what they're telling you is, how dare you not give me what I demand? How dare you see through what I'm trying to do to you? I think that's really all you're getting. And whenever you get a sense of that, it just becomes so much easier. It might feel uncomfortable in the moment, but it does become a bit easier to manage. So, where we get to? Okay, Rita's asking, I've forgiven too much to this specific sociopath, malignant narcissist. So have others. Have we made them worse? I can't tell you that you did. I can't tell you that you didn't. Your reasons for forgiving someone, other people's reasons for forgiving, are entirely up to you. Sometimes we can be conned into forgiving. Sometimes we've been guilt tripped into forgiving. Sometimes we have forgiven because we were taught it was the right thing to do. It was the good thing to do. I can't say whether it was or it wasn't, but we need to be honest with ourselves, even if it's with hindsight. Sometimes, even with the best intentions, all we actually did was enable someone. We didn't mean to, we didn't want to. We thought we were actually helping them. We were led to believe it was going to get better this time. It's okay to feel regret afterwards. But what we don't have to do is we don't have to beat ourselves up about it. If you give someone a chance, maybe you did it with the best of intentions. What they did with that was entirely up to them. And blaming yourself for someone else's behavior, especially someone who is quite prepared for you to take the blame for their behavior. This is the thing. Even if we're being provoked, we have to acknowledge that we are responsible for our actions. But we also have to acknowledge they are responsible for theirs, not us. We didn't make them lie. We didn't make them cheat. We didn't do any of that. They chose to. So if you think of the one-sided nature of the relationship, a narcissistic person will hold you to account for everything you do that they don't like. But they will also hold you to account for everything that they do that you don't like. When you see that pattern, when you see that dynamic, yeah, it hurts, and it's it's not fair, it's not good. But once you see that dynamic, it doesn't fool you anymore. More at the time, so I'm gonna leave you with a thought. This is the thing about other people holding you accountable for their behavior. You imagine someone lifts a frying pan and they just start beating themselves as hard as they can. Just beat themselves over the head with it as hard as they can. And they tell you, look at what you're making me do. Really. Where's the sense? Where's the logic in that? Sometimes you get some very cunning, clever people, and they're very good at manipulating you. But really, that's all they're doing. So, get the chat back. There we go. So, everybody, I hope tonight you find this interesting. Remember those questions. What is it needs to change? What is it needs to be different? What is it I need to do? What can I do? How could I go about doing it? What would get me a step closer? What advice, help, guidance, resources, whatever it is, would I need to help me do that? But also, as I say, pay attention, be honest with yourself. What would happen if I don't do this? Use that scale, wherever it is you are on it, just 1 point higher. That's all you're looking at, just that difference of 1 point that would get you that little bit closer. And you're looking at a destination that might not necessarily be here tomorrow morning. It could be a year, it could be 6 months from now, it could be a year from now, it could be whatever. But that's what you're working towards. It's the journey that you're on. Okay. So very happy Mondays. Oh, thank you so much. You're very welcome. Have a great weekend. May the force be with you. And hi, Freud. Listen, Freud is getting a bath and a haircut on Tuesday. He's going to the doggy groomers because he is an absolute minger right now. I had him at the park this morning. Well, I take him to the park every week, just apart from his normal walk. And this morning, he was rolling about in the mud and everything. You should see the state of him. So it's a good job I already had him booked in. So I will, of course, tell him hello. And thanks to your kind, your kind and generous donation there, Freud and I will be enjoying some sausages this week. Way so. Everybody, don't forget tomorrow night, putting out the video about how to handle the reactive abuse. Not how to stop them, not how to manage them, but it's how to manage you, okay? How to keep you grounded in reality, how to keep you focused on what's really happening. The stuff I'm going to be talking about is stuff that would apply to any kind of coercive control, okay? But I'm just going to be focusing from the perspective of the reactive abuse. So until next week, I will be back next Sunday. Again, I will put it out there. Topics, questions you might like me to answer. What I might do at some point, because I'm really interested in that question about Jung, and I might revisit some of his work. It's mostly just the shadow self and the dreams that I look at these days. But he does have a lot of stuff I don't understand, but a lot of stuff that's very interesting. So until next week, as always, everybody look after yourselves and take care. See you then. Bye now.